Today we're going to be dividing two numbers. In this case, fractions, decimals, either one. So when we're dividing fractions, you have to think of the inverse operation. Now this should be old news to you. The only thing we're doing is combining what we learned in the first unit along with what you learned probably in the 4th or 5th grade. So here we go. What do you do when you have fractions? If you say flip the second number, oh, not good. How about say multiply by the reciprocal? That's the 7th grade way of saying it. So we're going to do 3/7 times -8 over 3. Okay? Now we know our answer is going to be negative because we have a positive times a negative. Now, two ways we can do this. We can either simplify before we multiply or simplify after we multiply. I'll show you both ways. Let's just go ahead and multiply straight across, and we get 24 over 21. Now, what would we have to do with that answer? We'd have to simplify it. So let's divide it by 3 over 3, because 3 is the greatest common factor, the biggest number that will go into both. And we get -8 over 7. But what if I simplified before I multiplied? Would that give me the same answer? Let's look for some common factors that are shared by both the numerator and the denominator. In other words, you have to see it in both the numerator and the denominator. Well, I see a 3. What happens if we divide both the numerator and the denominator by 3? Well, in each case, we'll get a 1 remaining. So now you just do net 1 times 8, and that'll be 8. 7 times 1 is 7. And it's still a negative because you're doing a positive times a negative. Okay, let's go ahead and look at our next one. What if we have a mixed number involved? That's no big deal. You can always change it to an improper fraction. And in this case, it'll be 5 times 2 is 10, plus the 1 on top is 11. So it's -11/5. Now remember, we're going to use the inverse operations. We're going to do multiplying by -5 over 3. Okay, so some people say we flip that second number. I like to say we write the reciprocal. It's a lot fancier word. So, once again, we have a negative times a negative, so our answer is going to be positive. You would get 55 over 15, and you would have to divide by 5 to simplify it, and it would be 11 over 3. But wait, there's an easier way. Can we simplify before we multiply? Can we simply factor out a 5 from both the numerator and the denominator? One of them has to be in the numerator, one has to be in the denominator to be able to simplify before you multiply. And once again, you'll have 11 times 1 and 1 times 3, and the answer is still 11/3. Just a little bit quicker way to work the problem. Ooh, that looks like a mess. Did they write something wrong? No, that's really 5/9 divided by 1/3. So we do the problem the same way. It's 5/9 times the reciprocal, which would be 3 over 1. You could do 15 over 9 just by simply multiplying, but then you'll have to simplify, and you'll have 5/3. Or you can simplify before you multiply. How you're saying, how do you do that? What do 3 and 9 share? What factor do they share? Well, 3 goes into 3 evenly, and 3 goes into 9 3 times. So 5 times 1 is 5, and then 3 times 1 is 3. So you have the same answer. And this is a positive divided by a positive, so your answer should be positive. Okay, what about decimals? Well, the way you do decimals, and they'll probably write it in fraction form, which will really mess with you, but all you need to do is remember, whatever's in the denominator is what we're dividing by, and the other part will go on the inside. Now, don't worry about the negative right now. We'll worry about that at the very end. So, first thing we need to do is to change this to an equivalent problem by multiplying both the outside and inside by 10. Some people say move the decimal over 1. So 3 into 12 would be 4 times, and then 3 into 3 is 1 time. So our answer is 4.1. But wait a minute, this was a negative divided by a positive, and that should be a negative 4.1. Alright, this looks a little messier. We still know we are dividing by 0.25, and we have negative 62.5 on the inside, but let's not write that negative on the inside. That just doesn't look good. It's harder to see. So we'll do 62.5. Now we want to move our decimal over 2 places because it's easier to divide by a whole number. So let's move the decimal over 1, move the decimal over 2. We have to annex a 0. Now when you're doing this, that's basically you're multiplying both by 100. You're actually working what's called an equivalent problem. We'll talk about that a little in class. But let's go back to this one. How many times will 25 go into 62? 2 times. We subtract and we get 125. How many times will 25 go into 125? Well, I think of that as being 5 quarters. So that one made it pretty easy. 5 times 125. We get 0. Bring down your 0. How many times will 25 go into 0? 0 times. So our answer is 250, but is that our answer? Well, this is a negative divided by a positive, so it's negative. So you may need to brush up a little bit on your decimals and a little bit on your multiplying fractions before you start this work, because it might be just a little bit more difficult than normal.